Hello and welcome to Delmi Training Institute's DTIL 101 Introduction to Network Cabling, and this is lab number 2. And lab number 2 talks about how to stage your cables and prep them ready for deployment. This lab, since it's so hands-on, for those of you who are doing our online courses, you might not be able to have access to this. So this video allows you to watch so you can later on deploy it when you have the opportunity of being on the field. For those of you who are joining us here in class, you'd have the opportunity and the ability to really do it here in class and see how it's done. Well, let's talk about the objective of this lab. The objective would be to set up 12 boxes of, could be different categories of cables, so either your category 5E or category 6, and stage them out for deployment. So now let's talk about the tools and the material you're going to need for this lab. So first thing we're going to need is a set of boxes. So here we have 12 boxes of category 6 cables. Now we have a mixture of plenum and riser cables, and this is just for a demonstration. In the real world, if you're running plenum cables, make sure you stick with plenum cables throughout. And if you're deploying cables into a riser space, make sure you stick with riser. But just to simulate, we have 12 boxes that are already being used in the lab. You're also going to need your twine or a string, and this is a bucket of twine. One of the material that we also need is a roll of tape. We have a cable comb that comes in 2 parts, it's 2 pieces. That is going to help us put the cables together and dress them up nicely. A permanent marker, pair of scissors, going to need some Velcro or zip ties. And last but not the least, if you're going to be deploying these up in the ceiling space, you might need a fish pole or a telescopic fish pole. Now let's jump into what this whole lab is all about. At the end of the lab, we want to be able to achieve something like this. And then we can take the head end here, and then we can pull it up in our ceiling space and take it wherever it has to go. If we do have a cable support, a cable tray or a J-hook, then we're able to lift this cable and successfully place them on the cable tray or the cable on the J-hook. So the first thing we want to do here is, once we have the cable set up, we want to be able to pull up our floor plan if there is. And I highly recommend that you always request from the customer to provide you with a copy of their floor plan. So on your floor plan, mark up where each and every cable is going to go. And if you can use highlighters to differentiate between the data and the voice and the cameras and the access points and whatnot that you have with different color codes. And once you have them marked up, you can stage your boxes and pull. Now, I have to let you understand that anytime you're deploying cables, you always want to pull from the user end or from the field into the server room. And that's the best practice. You don't pull from the server room to the user end. I found out that doing this has cut down the number of times I have to keep tagging on individual cables. So remember, anytime you pull in bundles, always pull from the user end to the server room. First thing I'm going to do is, with the help of the permanent marker I have, I'm going to label all these boxes as per my floor plan. Now, since these have been used many times in the lab, I'm going to go ahead and look for a clean space on the box, and that's why I'm going to number my cables. I've also found out that because I have to use the cable comb, the numbering really does matter when you're doing this. So because I have 12 cables, I'm going to start numbering top, down, top, down, top, down till I get to the end. This allows me to split my cables into 2, half of it on this side, the first half, and the next half on that side, making my cables fall in uniformly. When I number my cables horizontally, so from 1 to 6 and 7 to 12, remember my cables have been numbered like this. My cable comb is split into like this. So then once I start to arrange my cables in, the cables do not follow a specific pattern. Remember, the trick here is to make your life easy as possible. So I'm going to be labeling my boxes from here up, down, all the way to the end. So since it's a brand new install, I'm going to start with my drop number 1. But first of all, I'm going to look on the box. If it has any numbers on them, I'm going to scratch them out to avoid me making mistakes. So I have a number 6 here. I'm going to scratch that out. So this is going to be my number 1. Here, number 2. And this is going to be my number 3, my number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's the first step. Next, I am going to pull out all these cables in that order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So these are the cables that I have. So what I'm going to do is, because I want my cables to be well tapered before I deploy them, I'm going to pull some of the cables and make them longer than others, like this. And once that is done, I'm going to use the electrical tape that I have just to hold it in place. I don't have to go all the way. Just this is good enough for me. At this point, I would want to start combing my cables using the cable comb. But before I do that, if I'm working by myself, I want to be able to cut out sections of the Velcro that I'm going to use on the zip ties. And this is just white, and ideally you want to use them for white cables. And if you have blue, you'd want to use black Velcro for them. We also do have Velcro that is plenum rated and that is riser rated. So make sure that you use the right Velcro with the right fire or flame test for whatever application that you are using. So here we're just going to use whites for demonstration. I'm going to pre-cut some of the Velcro and set them aside. This is going to make it easier for me when I have to bundle my cables. So I'll cut out probably about 5 to 10 at a time, and that's going to help me out during the process. So this is where the scissors comes in handy. So now that I have cut a few of the cables, the next step is I'm going to grab my cable comb and start to arrange the cables in. But now this is where it gets interesting. Remember, I did say from the beginning that you have to label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 12 boxes staged, and this happens to be the middle of the boxes. So the first 6 are going to be here, and the next 6. Now let's take a patch panel into consideration. When I'm going to be terminating on my patch panel, I would have from number 1 to number 24. So the cables are going to come this way. So by being able to have all the lower numbers on one side of the cable and increasing as it goes to the other side, I'm able to start terminating the lower numbers and have the higher numbers flow like that. And that's just one of the reasons why I do how I do it this way. So now this is the middle of the boxes. I have 6 on this side and 6 there. So I'm just going to put my hand in here, and this gives me an equal division between the lower 6 and the higher 6. Now let's take a look at the cable comb. You know, it comes with a place that you can grip and hold, and you always have to pull it towards you as the cables go out. So it's been designed in such a way that you can actually grip on it like that. And this is a 2-piece section. It does come apart. It only goes in from the back side. So wherever the other piece of the cable comb goes in, that flat portion always faces the box. And where you have the grip is going to face outside. So it's kind of like it's designed like that. So I'm going to take this apart and set this here. And I'm going to try and feed these into it. I'm going to start with the ones from here, and it really doesn't matter in what order. I can preferably start with the 1 and 2, these ones on the sides, but at that point it's at your discretion. You just want to make sure that the cables are not twisted like that as you feed them through the comb. I'm just going to start and let them lay carefully in the comb. This one, as I can see, it's on the top, so it just makes sense that I let it lay in that way. This one comes here, so I can just let it lay in here. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm holding on to the cable comb at the same time the cable to prevent it from falling, whilst I just look at the cable alignment and just try and feed them in like that. And I can put this here, and I can put that here. So I just finished putting in my first 6 to the right. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on the ones to my left. So this is right in the middle, so I can just put that in. This one I can place here. This one I can put on top. This can go here. This I can place here. I can take that one and I can place that also here. And you just have to do your own little arrangement to make it work for you. So now I've been able to arrange my cables properly on the cable comb like that, splitting the first half to the left and the next to the right. And once that is done, I'm going to take the other piece of the cable comb and I'm going to slide it on like that. Because I'm holding this whole place, it's much more skinnier. I can slide this on, and remember, it only goes one way. So if you try to feed it in like this, it's not going to work. You just have to go one way. So slide it in and feed it on like that. So now I have this on. One thing I've also learned, having been doing this for some time, is when you leave it like this tends to come out, especially if you want to leave it and go grab something, it comes out. So I grab the electrical tape and I'll just put a piece on where the two couple together. Just wrap a tape around it. And now with this, I can leave it and I know it's not going to come apart because of that tape that I did put around. So that's the first thing I want to do here. So having fed this, I am going to start to transfer the numbers that are on the box. I'm going to put that on to these cables. I'm going to leave the cable comb on it, and I'm going to hold this section because that's where I need to deal with. There's a reason why I don't put my numbers here, and I try and go about 2 feet off before I put my numbers. So at this point, if I'm left-handed, I want to stand on the side that the right-hand hand is going to be towards the box. But I'm right-handed, so as I stand this way, I want to have my right hand towards the box. But if you're left-handed, you want to be able to stand like this with your dominant right-hand hand towards the box like that. This is the hand I'm going to use to write. I'm able to guide the cable to the box and isolate it before I write any numbers on them. So I'm going to transcribe the numbers that I wrote on the boxes onto the cables now. So this is the number 1 cable. Just going to take my time and put a 1-1-1, and I'll leave a dash. The reason why I leave a dash towards the box is when I'm reading it and I see the dash after it, meaning that I'm writing from here to there. And this helps me to differentiate between numbers like 6, 9, 16, 69, etc. So I don't end up reading my number 9 as my number 6. All right, so that's just why we do it that way. So this is number 1. So I can proceed and take this cable and I can mark it here as number 2. So I put a 2, do the same thing, dash 2, dash 2, dash 2, dash. So as I do them, I use one of my fingers to try and separate them. And also the reason why I do them like this is once I'm done labeling, my numbers are all going to be in the exact same local area for me to differentiate them. Now, when I'm writing the numbers, I try and sandwich the cable between my little finger, which is my pinky, and then I try and write on it just to stabilize it for me a little bit. And once I label them, I separate them with some of my fingers so that I know the ones that I've labeled versus the ones that I haven't labeled yet. Well, so I have finished the next stage of the labeling, and as you can see, all the numbers are in the exact spot, and this makes it easier for me to identify them when it's time to terminate onto the patch panel and on the user end. Remember, this portion of the cable is what is going to go to the server room where the patch panel is going to be. Having the numbers in a localized area makes it easier to identify them than having them all scattered across the cable. So now this has been done. This moves us to the next step. Now I have to be working with someone. So then I'm going to start the next stage where I have to attach string to my cable. Now, why is the string important? You know, anytime you have to run cable in a false ceiling, it is very important that you run your cables through the ceiling, and that is where things like your fishbowl, and the telescopic tape comes in handy. So this tool, you can get them in sections of 3 feet or 6 feet, but this is just shorter ones that we use for demonstration in the labs. But when you go out on the field to actually buy them, you can get them in lengths of 3 feet and 6 feet, depending on what you want to buy. So all you have to do is take one end is the male and one end is the female, and you have to just keep connecting them like that, and you get a longer one. So if you choose the 6-foot fish sticks, as soon as you connect 3 of them, that is 18 feet. So once you're up in the ceiling, you are able to fish this up in the ceiling with your string on the end. So this is what we're going to be using. If you don't want to use that and you have access to a telescopic pole that looks like this, all you have to do is start bringing it out, and this actually extends. So you extend the first one, keep drawing it out, and you keep going. That's just how it works. So this gives you, this is about I'll say it's about 25 feet, and it keeps going. So you can keep extending it as much as you want. So this is how long you can keep extending it till you get to where you want. So one small piece can extend up to 25 feet, and then you can attach your cable or your string to it and deploy it above a long false ceiling space. So yeah, this is a telescopic pole. So now that your string of cable has already been installed from where the user end is all the way to the server room, you would have one of these twines already coming down from the ceiling. So you're going to have one probably dangling like that, and that is going to be your lead string, and you have to attach another string to the lead string and pull it, and that's what is going to pull all your cable. Now it's time to attach this twine to the cable, but there's a specific way that we have to be able to tie this, and it's called a slip knot, and that allows you to securely attach this to the cable, and anytime you pull, it grips onto the cable firmly. But bear in mind that we want to be able to distribute the pull force on all the cables that we have. Here we have 12 cables in total, so we want to make sure that bundle of 12 bears the entire pull force on that without just the first 2 or 3. So what we're going to do is, we have the section that's coming out of the bucket, and that's the long section, but we don't need that. So I'm just going to cut a piece out of the bucket like that. So this is the string I'm going to use to prep this cable. Now what I want to do is, I want to have a short side and a longer side. So see how the one to my right is longer than the one here. I'm going to put the shorter piece here, and I have a longer piece here. So I have about 5 feet to the front, and I have the shorter piece to the left. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to have the cable in both my left and my right hand. Now notice that I have the cables in my left hand, including the twine in both hands. So at the same time, I'm gripping onto the twine and attaching that to the cable like this, and I have the other side of the twine, which is the longer side, on my right. I'm going to take my right and I'm going to go on top like that. So it's going to be right over left. So like that, I'm going to do it again this way over that. I'm not going underneath it. If you do go underneath it, it's not going to work. It always has to be the top right onto the top like that. And once I do this, I can take this portion of the cable and I can feed it down like that, right? So that's just pretty much what I'm doing. Hold this and attach it to the cables that you have. So you have the twine and the cables in your left, and you have just the twine in your right. From right over onto left, and then I can hold this and I can feed the cables on top like that. And once I do that, I can pull this. Now notice what has happened here. I'm going to be pulling this forward, and the more I pull, it gets locked onto by that other portion of the twine. So that is the first one that I do. Now holding it, I'm going to repeat it again. Right over left, right? So right over left, and I take this and I feed it on top, and I pull this. So I've just made 2 of them. I'm going to do probably 2 more. If I'm doing 24 cables, I probably want to do about 4 of them. For 6 or 12 cables, probably 3 of them is going to be enough. So I'm going to do again right over left like that, and just feed this on and pull it. So now that I've done this, because I'm working by myself, I'm going to use my foot to help me. So I'm just going to place this down, and I'm going to put my foot on it like this. This is a very important step that I need to go through. So now this is going to hold that in place for me whilst I spread knots that I've done to be able to accommodate all the cables. So I evenly space these ones like that. I'm not letting go of this one. I'm always holding it because once I let go of it, it's going to mess up my whole thing. It's going to come apart and I have to do it again. So all I have to do is make sure that the bundle, it's here. The first one is on a few cables, but these two are bundled onto the entire 12 cables. And that's where I want to be. You can always make this, stretch it a little bit to the desired length. And once you start working your way down, you don't want to work like that. You always want to be upright. So if you need a little bit more, lift your foot up slightly and you can pull it up like that. So at this point, I'm going to use the electrical tape that I have and I'm going to start from the top. And I'm going to start twisting it and wrapping it around to secure the twine to the cables and also to help me get a tapered end. So if you come closer, I'm not just going to loosely wrap it around like this. If I just wrap it around like this, it's not going to hold it enough and then this could get caught. So I want to be able to stretch it a little bit as I put it around. And look at my hand movement. Thumb on the top of the tape and I keep the tape as short as possible. I don't try and pull like this. If you do like this, you cannot get a good amount of tension between the tape and the cables that you have. So I always like to keep it short like that. I hold it, put my thumb on it, stretch it like that. And as soon as I go underneath, I use the index finger to go underneath it, electrical tape on top. So that's just what I keep doing, spin it around. So the hand motion is very important. And you see I'm taping the string or the twine to the bundles and also having a tapered tip. You don't want to have spacing between this as you're doing it. If you have any spacing and you have exposed cable, it could get caught up into something up in the ceiling. Now once you get to the tip, you give it a couple more rolls like that and then you end up taking the tape off. So ideally this is what you want to be able to have like this, sticking out. So it's all tight and it's able to go into very narrow spaces so long as you can pull the tip of the cable to go through like that. You might have a piece of twine sticking here. We call it on the field, we call it the trailer, and we call this the leader. So this is the leader and this is the trailer. So that's what we want to have. So we're going to be using this portion in the next steps. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start putting the Velcro on here. So if I'm working with someone, they are going to hold this portion and they're going to start pulling it whilst I comb it. So this is what I'm going to do. So all the cables that are going to come out from the cable comb are well organized and well bundled, as you can see. As I come from here, this is where I start to feed the Velcro around the cable. So that's going to be my first step. But when I'm working, I always want to be a little bit smarter. So I put a couple of Velcros around like that. Put about 4 of them. So now I have some Velcros here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. Once I do this, I don't push too much. The cables are already bundled and I slip the Velcro onto it. So as I pull, I have my Velcro on it. And you can see that my cable is already being bundled nicely as and when I go. So it's just going to have the cable comb go down a little bit and have that on it. And I'm just going to keep repeating it till I have this into the server room. Once I have that and we've been able to deploy a lot of it, if I'm working with a cable support like a cable tray, we can start to lift the dressed part and lay them onto the cable tray. However, if it has to go through the ceiling, then this is what we have to do. Remember I did say that we're going to be having a string or a twine coming out from the ceiling. And that is the first thing that you did when you came to start pulling the cable. So you have this end of the string from the ceiling coming down. So that is one end. You have one other end from the leading end of your cable. So you're going to take both ends and put them together, meaning that this is coming up from the ceiling and this is supposed to go up into the ceiling. But there's something missing. When I use this and I pull it all the way through the ceiling, yes, I'm going to have this 12 cables go all the way to the server room. However, if I have to pull another set of cables, I just lost my string. So how do we get a replacement string when we are running this up into the ceiling? This is where it comes in. I have the bucket of string sitting next to me. So I'm going to take the tip of the string in the bucket, and I'm going to also include it onto the front of it. Remember, I'm not going to the trailer end of it, and I'll tell you the reason why. So you should always have 3 strings at the front like that, and you're going to put them together. All I just have to do is hold the right, just make a loop, and that's just one basic nut like that. That's just all that there is. Now we know that these cables that are in these boxes, they have been coiled in a circular and a spiral way into these boxes. So naturally, when you start bringing them out, they start to create a spiral. And when you have the string, the replacement string that is supposed to replace the string that you're going to use to pull these cables, if you have that attached to the trailing edge here, once these cables start to create a spiral, guess what? The string is also going to be wrapping around the cables as you pull them. And as a result, when you're trying to pull another set of cables, it's just going to start wrapping around, and halfway through, it's going to get stuck. But then, if you have the other end of the string that is coming out of your bucket, and you have it at the tip, it's not going to have effect of that spiral movement that is being created at the back, because your replacement string or your replacement twine is going to be at the beginning of it. So that spiral behind is not going to get affected. Once you've done this, then whoever is on the opposite end of where you are, which could be in the server room, could start pulling this end. And once they start pulling it, not only are they going to pull the cable itself, but they are going to end up pulling the replacement string with it. So they're going to have a bunch of the string come at the same time a bundle of the cable also come. So that is one of the ways that you get to pull it. So now let's assume that we've been able to deploy our cables all the way into the server room. What is next? We've been able to do it all the way, so now I do not need the use of the cable comb anymore. I can go ahead and take the cable comb off from the bundle of cables. All right, so my cables are where they're supposed to be. At this point, I have to go back to my floor plan and look at the floor plan and look at where my cables are going to go. So let's say, for example, this is one of the desks that I need to have 2 cables going. So those are going to be my number 1 and number 2. For example, if that is what relates to my floor plan, I do not cut at this point. I'm going to calculate the cable drop from the top of the ceiling all the way down. Now remember that the cable doesn't have to lay on the false ceiling. You have to be able to suspend it, sometimes about a foot or 2 above the false ceiling. So make sure that you take into consideration of that. Ideally, when you pull the cables are going to be laying directly above the ceiling tile. But your goal is, once the cable has been pulled, you want to be able to suspend it properly. So you're going to measure from the ceiling height all the way down. Take a guess, I'm about 6 foot. So when I look at this is about a 10-foot ceiling. So if I add another 2 feet, that's going to be 12 feet. So that's what is going to come down. Now I have to be able to walk the cable along to where the desk is going to be, and then route it to where it's going to be terminated. And once that is done, I'm going to leave probably about 10 feet of slack. And this 10 feet of slack gives you room to be able to route the cable in case that they move the furniture either back or forward. You have a little bit of cables to play with. Now, if this is my cable number 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take box number 1 and I'm just going to set it aside and grab one box and let it sit on it to give me some weight. So my cable comes down here. I put this on it so it doesn't move. And this is what we call walking the box. So I'm going to walk the box all the way to where the cable is supposed to be. So if this is the desk, I'm going to go, and if it has to wrap around, I'd make sure that I have enough cables to wrap around. And once that is done, I'm going to do about 2 arm stretches of this. Again, I'm 6 foot tall, so this is going to give me 6 foot, and another one, so then I have 2 that's going to be about 12 foot. It's always a good practice. Once I've done that, it's time to look at the number that I did write on the box in the beginning, and I'm going to transpose that onto the cable. 1-1-1-. So once that is done, I can now cut. Remember, don't cut the side that is on the side. Always cut the end that goes into the box. So that was my number 1, and then I cut this. So this cable is meant to go to user number 1. So at that point, I can just go up in the ceiling and I can route it, fish it down the wall, and bring it. So if fishing is a whole different lab that we're going to be talking about, but you're going to end up fishing this one all the way to user number 1, and it's ready to be terminated. You're going to repeat the exact same steps. So that table, for example, becomes user number 2. So I don't have use for this box. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Cable is coming down. I make sure that I have enough. This is box number 2. That has to go all the way to that user. So I'm going to go all the way above the ceiling, come down through the drywall, and feed it to the user. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to grab a box, and I'm going to let that box sit on it like this so the cable doesn't move. And I'm going to walk this all the way to the end. And once I walk it, I'm going to route it to exactly where the desk or the furniture is going to be. And then once that is done, I'm going to pull 2 of them, and I'm going to transpose the number 2 onto the cable, and then I cut. And I'm going to repeat that for all the other user stations. This is why it's very important that you don't pull from the server room to the user end, because now you have a bundle. Trying to pull individual cables is very difficult and challenging. But if you do it this way, you have an even number of cables and an equal distance of cable in the server room. Now let me talk about the server room. Let's assume that we have the cables into our server room, and this is the entire server room. Most of the time, the customers, they change their mind as and when the plan is going on. Even though you might have a solid plan, sometimes the position of the 2-post rack or the 4-post rack might change due to some reconfiguration they might have. And it's always very important as a cabling technician to have enough provision for extra cable in the server room, so that if those changes happen, you would have enough cable to route them. Remember, there's nothing like a cable stretcher, and you cannot stretch this, so you got to make enough provision for it. So let's say, for example, the customer or the floor plan indicated that the server rack or the 2-post rack is going to be here. Obviously, my cables came from here and they have to go down there. A good practice would be to come directly into the center of the room and walk the cable all the way to one end of the wall and go all the way to the other end. So you come in from the center, you're walking to one end of the wall and walking again. And once you get there, you have to make provisions for 2 or 3 arm lengths. Why are you doing that? Because remember, when you route your cables to come down, they have to go back up into that. I'm not a big fan of having coils of cables and stacking them in the server room and calling it a slack. No, remember that anytime you have a big coil of cable like this, the electromagnetic field created around that is so strong, so it affects the cable signal propagation. So I'm not a big fan of having a coil of cable above. However, I like my cables to come down in a nice big U to go onto the patch panel, or I create a figure 8, and that way the noise cancels out. So your figure 8 is going to look like something like this, and the noise is going to cancel out. Or I create one big U like this, and this goes into the patch panel. So that is one of the steps you have to take in the server room. Now, there is also one thing that I do want to talk about, and this is very important when you are working on modular furnitures in an office space. So in some office spaces, they have cubicles, and you could have a cubicle that stretches out from the wall and maybe 8 users in here. The common mistakes I've seen technicians do is they bring the cables all the way and they measure them straight down and just probably leave about 6 feet to the user desk. You have to bear in mind that when you're working on a modular furniture or sections, the cable has to come all the way, go to where it's going to feed into the furniture, and then it's going to feed all the way. So if my cables are coming from here, instead of just dropping the cables here, I want to go all the way to this wall, make provision to come down and measure it all the way back here. So it's going to be like a big C, this way, down and down. That is how you're going to bring your cables to the furniture. So if again on the floor plan, it has number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that's what you're going to do. You're going to bring 8 cables in a bundle. As the cables come, you're going to route it all the way to the left, bring it down and down this way. Sometimes you might be wondering, how am I able to make that calculation? So the best thing is open that ceiling tile above, drop the cable onto the floor, grab a pile of boxes, let it sit on it, and walk the cable all the way to this end and bring it all the way back. Right, so this gives you your vertical height. This gives you taking it to the wall. All right, and the other one you're going to bring all the way to this one, brings it all the way to user number 1 and 2. So these are some of the things you have to take into consideration when you're running cables like that. You're going to continue to route the cables as per your floor plan. And anyone that you route to the floor plan, make sure you put a check mark that these cables have been installed. Now, if you have to go on to pulling another bundle of 12 because you just had 12 boxes, you're going to repeat the exact same steps from what I did from the beginning of erasing all the numbers on the boxes, relabeling the boxes, and doing exactly the same. Well, so this brings us to the end of this lab number 2. I hope you found it educative and informational. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our socials, and I'll see you on the next one.